speaker this term, Sam Gustman, who is the Executive Director of Technology at the Survivors of the Shoah Visual History Foundation. Sam has been with the foundation for 8 years now. He got his bachelor's from the University of Michigan, and after that was at the Army Corps of Engineers, and since then has been in charge of technology development at the Shoah Foundation. And he says that he also consults for DreamWorks and Sega, various Hollywood ventures. So if you have leaning in that direction, you should talk to him about trying to break into the business. He's going to talk about the work the Shoah Foundation does, and we'll probably also mention the recently begun ITR project with the Shoah Foundation that involves CLSP.
Thank you very much. Let me just go in a little bit of history of the Shoah Foundation. It was started in 1994 by Steven Spielberg after Schindler's List was released. He started getting approached by thousands of survivors who wanted to tell their stories. And one of the things that he said was, you know, maybe there's a way we can capture all these stories and let these people tell these stories. So he started the Shoah Foundation with the goal of collecting what we thought, you know, there was about 350,000 survivors in the world, we thought at the time. And what we were able to do was interview, by the end of the project, the production side of the project, almost 52,000 survivors. To date, we've collected 51,659 interviews from around the world. It's a little over 116,000 hours of video. The production has taken place in 57 countries around the world. Oh, wonderful. And actually what I'm going to do is, there's a little video that we've got, which is sort of a mission statement of the Shoah Foundation when it was first started. It gives you some context about how the foundation was started. You hear from Steven Spielberg's mouth exactly what it was that he was going through when it was started. And then we'll start, once we've got some background about the foundation, we'll go into some of the production pieces of it, then we'll talk about some of the technical aspects until there are no more questions about the technical aspects. So what I'm going to do right now, real quickly, is turn on this video and let you guys listen to that. This will just take me 1 second to set up.
On the set, and so many survivors would come up to him and say, "Stephen, I've got a story for you."
You were fucked up for we're on a plane. I don't remember what we were telling you so much of that, but Stephen turned to those of us that were aboard and said that he would like to start videotaping survivors' testimonies.
We started Holocaust. Now it's about more than 100 people here and so many all around the world.
We're making a very concentrated effort to retrieve and rescue almost 320 interviews a week until we're either at 50,000 or as many interviews as survivors will volunteer to us.
The foundation relies on a tremendous volunteer pool, and many of the volunteers are survivors. And working day to day with the survivor community has made the foundation the success that it is.
Being involved with an organization like the Shoah Foundation that's really making a difference is so rewarding. I mean, you can feel it when you walk through the halls and you see people in the research department, or you see people on the phone booking interviews. We go into shipping and you'll see the massive numbers of tapes that are coming in and going out constantly. And it's not easy work, but everyone here really knows that they're working on something extraordinary. The Shoah Foundation is already making a difference. We're creating educational CD-ROMs, books, documentaries. As a matter of fact, we screened our first documentary for a group of students and brought them together with Holocaust survivors.
What was the first thing you did when you got out of the camp?
My only wish was to be able to get out and to find somebody I belong to. Many times I feel that younger people are more open-minded, understand it better. That's why these events with the schools are just the most important thing.
Can they do that with like a little tattoo?
Not a little, they're the big needle. They're doing more here that hurts you not. The students are very interested to learn from the past so that never happen in the future. I've heard comments between Jews and blacks. Jews going through the Holocaust and blacks going through slavery. I've heard conflict between both of them saying one situation is worse than the other. How do you feel about that, you being a Jew? The essence, the end product is the same. It's love and hatred. People get deeper, and they shouldn't happen.
When I came out of the camps, it was only then that I recognized how important it is to be proud of who I am. And this is our message to you. Not to be ashamed. Ashamed of what? We are all God's children.
I am sitting
Yeah.
here. Can I show your hand? Are you allowed to?
That's the best thing
I had a friend in school who became a communist, became very active communist, a young girl, as a matter of fact, a beautiful red-haired girl. A gang of Polish people caught her. They cut all her hair off and naked ran her down the streets screaming.
An interview possesses power that text simply does not possess. When someone looks you in the eye and says, I'm the only one left, I am the only typist left, you cannot help but think about what that means.
To read in a book about millions and millions of people killed, it's very hard for any of us to understand or relate to that. But to see a testimony with emotion, with expression, is a very, very different type of experience.
Once we take this first example, we'll be able to do it for Japanese internment, we'll be able to do it for Native Americans, we'll be able to do it for Martin Luther King's March, and take all of these different events that occurred and allow people to learn from them.
When social studies are taught in the classrooms of the 21st century, that my children, my children's children, are really going to be able to see history firsthand. And where our own kids can learn that no matter who you are, what color you are, what you've been through, pain is pain. And we all do share that in common.
50 years ago, we were hoping that humanity will never forget what happened and that we will not have to teach this anymore. And here we are. Here we are, we look around the world and things didn't change.
The story is repeating herself. This time there wasn't Jews, but there was some Muslims selected. Our stories are not talking only about us. We want that people understand that this cannot happen to anyone, to any race.
What did you learn from our experiences? Why don't you look at us? Why don't you learn? Why don't you change?
We who are in the position to move people and ideas forward have to all get together to make sure that schools are going to teach this in the future. Because if they don't, then ignorance, and through ignorance, racial hatred, is going to betray our trust of the human condition.
regardless of our religious background or ethnic background, this is it's a human issue. I think now's the time to step up to the plate and say, yes, I want to be a part of this.
We're really all in it together, and we're telling one story. And the story really is about why people learn to hate. They're not born hating, but they acquire hatred. And we really have to all work together to fight, to teach tolerance.
This video was made towards the beginning of the foundation as a mission statement about what we were doing and how we were moving forward. So where we are today is, again, we've been in 57 countries around the world and collected testimonies in 32 different languages. It's 116,000 hours of video. There are a number of places where we've collected well over 5,000 testimonies. The United States has got the most populous amount. We've collected almost 20,000 testimonies there. The second most is what is now the former Soviet Union. If you took all of those areas together, we've interviewed a little over 9,000 people in those areas. And then the next would be Israel in terms of size. And then we have a number of them like Australia and France, where we've taken a significant number of testimony. In terms of the languages, English is almost 50% of the archive. The other languages, the largest amount is Russian and then Hebrew in terms of the content of the archive. And so what we have now, what I'll do real quickly is take you through this little diagram of the workflow and process through the foundation as we collect the testimony, and then I'll start talking about the systems themselves. So for the production process, we give a survey to the survivor about a week before, and the interviewer will call them up, and this is a structured survey that gives us a lot of information about the testimony itself. The interviewer also uses it to research any topics that may come up during the interview that they don't know or understand or have had any experience with. After they've done that research, the interview will occur. We take the testimony in beta SP and ship that back, so they're half-hour tapes. The average size of a testimony now is about 2.5 hours, so it's 5 beta SP tapes that get shipped back after the actual interview occurs. We then digitize the testimonies. We've currently digitized them into 3 megabit per second MPEG-1, which creates a 180 terabyte digital library to work with. After the testimonies are digitized, we enter in the survey information to build a top-level record of that digital testimony for searching at the testimony level. After we've done that, we catalog and break the testimony down into clips or segments that are searchable through keywords or the people that are mentioned within those testimonies. Once the cataloging is complete, we then have different types of distribution we've been doing. To date, we've built 8 documentaries, 2 CD-ROMs, 1 book, and we've enabled quite a bit of access to museums and researchers, and now the foundation has really changed its focus from being a collection group to being a distribution institution, and to enabling other people to start building more documentaries, more CD-ROMs, online interfaces for the educational purpose of teaching tolerance using the survivors' testimonies. Let me talk a little bit about the distribution system that we're working on at the moment. What we're doing is we're taking the production information and the metadata that is generated from that, and we're coming up with sets of content and access policies. We have survivors. There's a real danger to the survivors in the world still, unfortunately. We have survivors in places like Poland who've told us that you can show my testimony anywhere in the world except in Poland, because if you show it here, I'm going to start having all kinds of problems with my neighbors. We also have quite a bit of information about the survivors in these testimonies, in some cases enough to make a credit card even. So we have to make sure that whatever information that brings back to, that's of a personal nature, whether it's grandchildren and their full names or it's personal information. We need to make sure that that's secured as well within the digital library for distribution. So if we jump to the bottom of this picture, we have 3 different types of distribution modes that we've got. We have products like documentary CD-ROMs, things that would go through a mass distributor that could get created by some production team of some kind. We have online exhibits where someone would have access to the entire archive to be able to move through the testimonies as they do research. And then we have one-offs, which would be museum exhibits that maybe integrate the survivor testimony into them, or standalone digital servers that would serve up some portion of the actual testimony. We've just delivered something like that to a museum in the Netherlands, the Joodse Historical Museum, and that was our first delivery to a European museum of foundation content. In the middle here, what we have is, once we've got these policies, what we're working on now is how do we secure the information based on those policies, and how do we distribute it globally by peering with wide area networks to get the information out to interfaces that would be at universities. So infrastructure such as Internet 2 can be helpful in this, and there are some other wide area networks that can be helpful in starting to do the online distribution of the archive. The underlying structure of the digital library allows us to break the testimony into searchable elements. Whenever you create a database, you want to worry about what your elements are and how you do a set algebra over those elements to be able to build them together into sets of information that you can deliver to people. So one of the first things we had to do was define what our base element was that we were going to create as we catalog and break the testimonies down and populate a digital library with them. So the first element is called a phrase. And what this phrase, and these have different names over the years, these names have changed. These were the very first names that were in our database. You can see some of them still, and those names have changed over time. But this first object called a phrase, what we did was we associated one column, which was a descriptive phrase or a note, a summary of what could be told about a specific segment of it or a piece of video. We then associate it with a specific piece of video through the in and out time code. Obviously, there was a unique testimony that each piece of video belonged to. Then there's a set of keywords which come from a thesaurus, which follows a standard called Z39.19. I have a slide on that if there's any library science folks that would like to talk a little bit about the thesaurus structure. Then there's a set of people that get associated with a phrase. We can also associate maps of specific locations that may be mentioned, and also still images. The survivors, we don't collect artifacts from the survivors during their interview. We have them show them on the video. And then what we do afterwards, after it's been cataloged, is we go into the actual MPEG and we pull out a JPEG of that. So we have JPEGs of photographs that they may have shown, items they may want to have shown, or specific things that are of interest. We also can associate video with these phrases. So if there's documentary video of a specific event, such as Kristallnacht or something that there is some documentary video of, that can be digitized and associated with one of these phrases, which is the base elements within the digital library. Then what we've done is we've built it so that you can start grouping these phrases together into sets of information, originally called segments. And these sets allow you to do something like, if you had a testimony where you had phrase 1 through phrase 10, you could say that one set was made up of phrase 1 through phrase 3, another set phrase 4 through 6, and another set phrase 7 through 10. If you were to add the set 1 or segment 1 and segment 3 together, you get a new segment that was made out of the phrases 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So you're now able to group together the base elements into whatever kind of collection you'd want within the digital library. This is very helpful if you're trying to do a study of possible topics like living conditions in camps or ghettos or something, and you wanted to just get the pieces of testimony from within, and not get the whole testimonies, but be able to just grab certain sets and collect them together so that you can work through that information on your own time. The sets, we actually created a set of metadata at the top level that mirrors what you're able to do in the digital library element and phrase, so that you can add textual information about your collection of phrases. You can attach keywords to describe from the same thesaurus that can describe your set of phrases. You can also attach a set of people and their metadata so that you're able to search through that to get to whatever your set of phrases are that you're interested in.
Quick question. The associated video is not from the interview, right? It's other...
No, it would be other interview, not that was a documentary video or something that provides context to the testimony, and you're able to attach that or associate that as well with the phrase object.
Okay, and you don't have something similar for, say, associated stills? I mean, you don't have a picture of the person that's mentioned in the interview?
We don't have, for still imagery, if it's not shown in the interview, then we don't have that at the moment. The only other image that we've built an object for at the moment is maps, but it would be a trivial exercise if we had pictures of survivors to be able to do that. But we've tried. We're not a physical archive. We've got the videotapes, which is quite a bit to actually manage, but we don't accept materials per se from individual groups. Otherwise, we would end up with far more material than we'd be able to actually physically manage.
When you say it's associated, you mean there's a link, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like on the web.
Right, except it's an actual object within the digital library, so that it's a column. It's like a column in a table. The column can be populated with the still images or the video, and so the value of the associated video.
It's not that you copy the picture of. It's not that you copy the map of. I don't know.
No, we digitize them. We digitize the map. Yes.
Yeah, and there's just one map there.
That's right. And there's a link to it. That's right. When you instantiate it, in terms of the logic of the digital library, though, it's one object, and yes, there's an object ID which refers to the map, which is the actual content, but that's the ID that you would instantiate if you wanted to see the map for that particular phrase.
The reason I asked about stills is because if someone mentioned I live on such and such street in the city, and that street happens to still exist, it would be great to have a picture of that street in there, just to give.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea to have imagery if we could manage getting that imagery, getting it digitized and put in. It's easy to do if it goes across all of them. Like if we have one documentary of Kristallnacht, every time Kristallnacht as an event is applied to a testimony, that it could refer to that one documentary. But if we had individual images that we were collecting as artifacts for every one of the 52,000 testimonies, we'd be overwhelmed with material in terms of being able to digitize it. What we've done is, which is the best that we've been able to do, is to actually videotype images or photographs at the time of the testimony itself to try and deliver the best image archive we can. Yes?
I noticed that there's no column for language or languages that the testimony was given. Has that been added since?
It's not done at the phrase or the segment level, but it's done at the pre-interview questionnaire, that survey that we talked about, which gives information at the testimony level. This talks about the digital library in terms of within the testimony. It doesn't, you can refer to the actual testimony itself, which has quite a bit of metadata about the survivor themselves, and the production information that goes along with the testimony.
But it kind of all brings up an interesting point, which is that are all the testimonies in one language? I mean, it seems
all the testimonies are in 32 languages.
No. For a particular testimony, is that...
There can be 2 to 3 different languages that occur within a testimony.
And that's not marked.
We don't mark right now where that's right. We don't mark right now which language they've switched to at a particular time. And really, what happens when they start mixing languages? I'm not sure how well that can be done, because they'll start to use phrases or slang. They'll add in Yiddish slang, or they'll add in Hebrew slang. It won't necessarily be a sharp normal cut where they'll be talking in English, then they'll switch to German for 5 or 10 minutes, then they'll switch back to English. It'll be slang or phrases that'll get thrown in from different languages. Yes?
Are most of the interviews interactive, or is it just one person talking all the time?
There's an interviewer and an interviewee.
So,
and a videographer in the room. So the interviewer has a set of questions.
And the interviewer does.
And the interviewer asks the questions and tries to evoke story from the survivor. Now, sometimes what happens in the testimony is the survivor knows what they want to say, and 95% of the testimony is the survivor speaking. Other times the interviewer really has to work to start evoking some of the story.
So in a given phrase is might there be multiple people?
Yes.
And that's not labeled as something.
It's not labeled whether there's both the interviewer and the videographer speaking within a phrase.
Using what criteria do you divide the phrases? How do you decide what the phrase boundaries are?
Well, right now, what we're doing is we found that it's better for, what we did in the beginning is we actually had the cataloger deciding where the beginning and the end of the boundaries were. And what we discovered is that for end users, depending on the different kind of end user you get different types of boundaries that are important to them. Documentarians will end up with very different types of boundaries that they'd want to see cataloged than a teacher who's trying to build some information for students, which is very different than what you might find that a researcher would want in terms of boundaries. So we've created 1-minute segments. They're all 1 minute now. And what we let people do is build their own segments or collections of those 1-minute phrases to put together whatever the story is of interest to them.
And that minute could be in the middle of a sentence.
Yes, it can.
So the actual archive is a mix of things that were segmented in the original way, and
Yeah, but only a small percentage is done in the original way, and the rest is going to be done. Only 3,000.
What did you say?
Only 3,000 will be have segments where there's going to be variable based on what the cataloger's perception is of the segment length. But we are going to recatalog those with the other process as well. So we'll have both that, and that's actually data that's going to be used. We're going to actually do some tests. We have some research projects, which I'll talk about in a bit, where we're actually able to use that original data and compare some of the results of what we get by having just the solid 1-minute segments. It gives, we now have 8,000 hours of video where we've got information in both different types of categories to test these things against.
So for the catalogers, for the first 3,000
First 3,000
testimonies,
yes.
How many different catalogers were there, and did they have different motives?
We have 40 different catalogers. We have 40 people working in the cataloging department.
Okay, so, and were there criteria on making the first 3,000 phrase boundaries? Were there criteria?
Yes, there was a methodology for it, but again, it was at the discretion of the cataloger when it was created.
was it by topic?
It was really by when they felt that a story was beginning and ending. And there was obvious changes most of the time for when that was occurring. But one of the things that we're discovering is that what a researcher or a cataloger may think is an obvious change from one story to the other is not the same to a different type of an end user. So we stopped doing that. Okay, so this is the underlying structure for the digital library within a testimony. Again, there's a whole survey-based structure which gives all the production information and in-depth detailed information that the interviewer is using to actually research the testimony before they give it. That is also entered, that can be considered like a super mark record for this actual testimony, for searching at the testimony level. I think what I'm going to do now is just sort of show you what it looks like when you query the system. Move this out of the way, turn on the portable. So I have an interface up here which is actually for the programmers themselves. We have different web-based interfaces that we're building for educational purposes that are not finished yet, but this has the functional underlying engine in it. So what I'm able to do is, let's do a simple query, go in here, and based on the thesaurus itself, we talked about camp conditions. So let me put in here living conditions.
So you know ahead of time that is thesaurus?
No, I'm actually just searching the thesaurus now. I know that it'll come back and tell me a bunch of different types of living condition keywords that are in the thesaurus itself. So let's talk about living conditions in the camps. I'm going to generate a query on this. And what I'm going to get back are a set of those phrases. They're called, unfortunately, we have a little namespace problem here. We ended up calling our phrases segments later on. People like calling them segments more than they did phrases. So that name changed. But we'll get up a list of actual phrases that we can start moving through.
What's the new name for segment?
They are. We used to call segments phrases. Is what
So now that what used to be phrases are now called segments.
That's right.
So
Oh,
what used to be segments
is now called projects.
Projects. Projects.
Yes. I'm sorry. This is hopefully going to come back in a second here. Sure.
Are the projects that end users add structure to the underlying segments or whatever, are those added back to the database?
Yes, they're stored persistently. Okay, so I've come up here. I'm sorry.
And so there might be a set of, or a large set perhaps of those projects for a single piece of testimony or across different testimonies?
Right, and actually, we're not that far yet, but one would be able to, it'd be interesting to see how many projects actually get created over a certain testimony, and you'll find more popular testimonies, and it'd be interesting to see what the patterns are, why, as we start to give more access to the archive. So we've got here a bunch of segments, and you can see the in and out time code, or phrases as they were referred to in that other slide, but the in and out time code, the keywords, any people that are actually mentioned.
So is this, so it looks like there may be like 100 testimonies, sorry, 100 phrases.
Yeah, there's 3,000, actually for this particular query, there's 3,442 phrases that came back.
Okay, that still seems very low.
Well, this is out of only the first 4,000 testimonies. This is just a small subset that I've got on here. I'm doing the best I can on the portable. And we actually don't have that many more though than that first 4,000 right now. We've got about 7,000 total, and we're constantly moving. But now what I can do is I can take a look at a specific testimony, and I can watch the actual video for it on a specific segment, or I can go and move up to the testimony and watch it at a testimony level. I'll just watch the video for this particular segment where we talked about living conditions.
What did you click on? What did you click on to get this picture?
I clicked on, I brought up the segment that was the result of the query on living conditions, and then I went and I've got all the metadata for that segment, and I said, show me the video now for that segment.
And the description that we see there in the paragraph, that's written by a cataloger.
That's correct.
Who listened to it and made this sort of a summary.
That's correct.
Oh, so it's not a transcription?
No, it's actually just a summary.
Tremendous. And everybody from Eastern Europe are going to Brussels. Overcrowded.
I'm sorry, it's...
No, not enough barracks. Again, they shoved us, 2,000 people in unfinished barracks. And not enough food. And in and out of the barracks and hitting us and screaming, and it was just the worst nightmare that you can even think about. There's no way you can escape. I mean, my friend George could not make it. And one day I saw him in the mud, dead. And we stayed only 3 days at Crossroads, and he couldn't make it. He was dead. Did I cry? Didn't. To me, it was just somebody who couldn't make it. I'm still alive and he's dead. I'm still on my feet, even though we were very weak by then, because we only had twice a piece of bread during those 15 days, and once a piece of bread in Brussels during 3 days. That's all they gave us to eat. And
This looks a little better on my video screen than it does up
distributed
there.
that piece of bread, and people just grabbing it like we were animals. They made absolutely animals out of us. Not even decent animals. We were all going to survive, and it was just awful. Third day, they evacuate that group, that Lehano people. We're going up with 2,000 people. No, with less than that because people died in the gross wars. And they found an open cattle train, and they put us in it. But before that, we stayed in a very long line, and I see the people in my convoy going to a barrack, and I don't see them coming out. And I knew about gas chambers. I said, like, this is it. This is it. I survived for over 2.5 years, but this is it. Goodbye, world. We went to the barrack to be registered for the 1,000-year Reich, so they will know when. Oh, the old records are there. When you arrived at Gross-Rosen, when you left Gross-Rosen, it's all there again, even though Hitler was losing the war.
So I'm looking at the segments right now. I can actually go up to the testimony level. What do I have open? See if I can find his again. So at the testimony level, what we've got for this particular testimony is a summary of the entire testimony. And we don't actually do that right now in the new, with the 1-minute thing. This is what we used to do with the old process. But
What we saw before was a summary of just that segment.
yeah, now this is a summary of the entire testimony. But here's what we do have is those still pictures I was telling you about. We go in and we take a JPEG. So this is a JPEG. This is him showing his tattoo. This is his paternal grandparents. This is of his siblings in the 1920s. And these are all in the video itself. He shows these in the actual video, and what we do is we grab a JPEG out of the MPEG stream when the cataloger tells us that a still has actually occurred.
So all this is mentioned in the testimonies that why we...
Yeah, the way we actually got to this is we did a query, I just did a query on living conditions in the camps, and his testimony came up. A specific segment, he does talk, which we listened to, he talked about living conditions. So we brought that up and we brought that video up, and then what I've done is I've jumped up to his entire testimony from just that one segment of video that we were watching.
About those pictures, he's talking about his family or something?
Yeah.
That's why it's there, or is it there anyway? I mean, had he not mentioned it, would it...
These are actually in the video. If you watch the video, these pictures come up in the video.
He showed it to me. Oh, he showed it to me.
Yeah.
So, but probably there is therefore some talk about it.
That's right. Yeah, he does talk during it. Let me see if I can get some video up of...
Can you link that to the stills to the segment video version?
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me... Yeah, they do. Again, this isn't the most user-friendly interface, but I'll be able to show you. Oh, here's a piece of video. Hopefully I've got it on the box. No, I don't, I'm sorry. I don't have all of his testimony loaded on my portable, but
Oh, that's right. It's easy for you to store the stills because it's just an indexing to the thing.
yeah. Hold on one second. Well, actually, no. We actually keep them as separate JPEGs because it's just not that much space for the JPEGs.
Oh, I see.
Let me see if I've got enough of the... No, I'm sorry, I don't have any video where he actually shows a still picture in it, but yeah, I've only got, I actually set this up beforehand, I knew, I've only got some of his testimony on because it's about 4 gigabytes per testimony digitized, so that's the amount of storage that I've got for it. Maybe I do have though where he shows the tattoo. So let me actually just go look up just his testimony. There it is. I just would have to look through. I'm not sure. I could search on. I'm not sure the keyword for that particular kind of still where he shows the tattoo, though, off the top of my head.
What SLS might retrieve?
Stills would probably retrieve it. I can do a search. And I'd be happy to sit around and do that search afterwards if anyone wants me to go do that. But really where we are right now is we've got the basic digital library which we're populating, and now we're trying to learn what it takes to build user interfaces for it. At the same time, what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out how to automate the process. It costs $10 million to catalog the archive when watching the video in real time. To date, we've spent about $175 million total on the project. And we're doing a number of efforts trying to figure out how somebody could do this type of a project and collect this type of an oral history again and not spend so much money. One of those efforts we're actually working with Johns Hopkins on. We just received a large ITR grant from the National Science Foundation where we're trying to use speech recognition and voice recognition and topic detection and all kinds of other different goodies to do what we do manually with the computer. And if we were able to build or help automate some of what we do, then hopefully this will become cheaper so that other folks will be able to do this. And also maybe we'll learn different ways that we can be searching and manipulating and moving through the archive as well. So we're really at the beginning of the distribution phase. We finished, up until 2000, all of our efforts were on the collection, and now we've really, our primary efforts are on the cataloging and on figuring out the best ways to distribute the archive, which is part of why we've got these new partnerships like the ITR grant. So I think I'll stop there if there are any questions. Thank you very much.